Welcome to Space Mysteries, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's talk about the US-EU trade deal, a deal that was supposed to mark a new era of cooperation between two of the world's largest economies, but instead has ignited a political firestorm on both sides of the Atlantic. What was meant to be a straightforward agreement has become the center of controversy, dominating headlines and sparking heated debates in parliaments, boardrooms, and on the streets. Negotiated during the Trump administration and later championed by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, this trade pact is now being labeled by many as a disaster for Europe, a deal that has left European leaders scrambling to justify their decisions. Critics argue that the EU's negotiators caved under pressure, prioritizing the optics of a quick agreement over the substance of a strong strategic partnership. Instead of standing their ground, they rushed to sign, hoping to score a political win. The result? A lopsided agreement that many see as a surrender rather than a partnership. Analysts point to key concessions made by the EU, which seem to favor American industries at the expense of European businesses and workers. Observers argue that the EU failed to protect its 450 million citizens, trading away long-term economic interests for the sake of a diplomatic handshake. Many fear that this deal could undermine European industries, jobs, and even the continent's ability to set its own standards. The backlash has been fierce and immediate. Protests have erupted outside government buildings, and opposition parties are calling for the deal to be scrapped entirely. The sense of betrayal is palpable among both politicians and the public. Instead of building a bridge across the Atlantic, this agreement has become a symbol of capitulation, a stark reminder of what can happen when political expediency trumps careful negotiation. The conversation has shifted dramatically. Instead of focusing on how to implement the deal, leaders are now debating whether it should be rejected outright. The mood has soured, and trust in the negotiation process has eroded. This has triggered a political brawl within the EU, exposing deep divisions between member states, political parties, and even within the leadership itself. Some see the deal as a necessary compromise, while others view it as an unforgivable mistake. The deal's critics are digging in, determined to block ratification and force a complete rethink of Europe's trade strategy. They argue that the EU must learn from this episode and never again allow itself to be outmaneuvered at the negotiating table. The stakes are incredibly high, not just for the economy, but for the EU's credibility on the world stage and its future as a unified political and economic bloc. Investors are watching closely, and the uncertainty is already affecting markets. This episode is quickly becoming a masterclass in diplomatic missteps. It's a case study in how not to negotiate, and a warning to future leaders about the dangers of rushing into international agreements without proper scrutiny. It highlights not only the immense pressure the EU faced from both internal and external forces, but also the leadership's failure to stand firm and defend European interests when it mattered most. The agreement was meant to renew and strengthen the transatlantic partnership, but now it stands as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the best intentions can lead to unintended consequences. Europe's leaders are under fire from all sides, and the fight over this deal is just beginning. The coming months will determine not only the fate of this agreement, but also the future direction of the EU's global role and its ability to protect its own interests in an increasingly competitive world. So what's actually in this deal? Let's take a closer look at the contents of this highly controversial agreement and why it's causing such a stir across Europe and beyond. The details, often buried in dense legal language, reveal a story that's far more complex than the headlines suggest. At its core, critics say it's a capitulation to US strong-arm tactics. The negotiations, which many hoped would result in a balanced partnership, instead became a showcase of American leverage and European vulnerability. The EU, under mounting pressure from both economic and political fronts, signed off on terms that overwhelmingly favor American interests. Observers point out that the speed and secrecy of the process left little room for public debate or meaningful scrutiny. Key European industries, especially manufacturing, technology, and agriculture, are left exposed. The agreement includes investment pledges that, on the surface, promise growth, but in reality could undermine Europe's autonomy and long-term competitiveness. These commitments risk locking Europe into economic patterns that benefit the US and stifle EU growth. By prioritizing American access to European markets, the deal could make it harder for European companies to innovate or compete on a global scale. The agreement, when examined closely, reads more like a list of American demands than a balanced treaty. Provisions on digital trade, intellectual property, and regulatory standards all seem tilted in favor of US corporations. Critics argue the entire structure is broken, built on EU concessions with little in return. They say the EU gave up too much too quickly and got only vague promises in exchange. Instead of mutual respect and cooperation, the agreement cements American dominance at Europe's expense. It's seen as a symbol of shifting power dynamics, where the EU is forced to play second fiddle. The deal sets a dangerous precedent. If the EU can be pushed around by a powerful ally, others may try to do the same. It raises questions about Europe's ability to defend its interests on the world stage. It also ignores the broader geopolitical context and long-term consequences. In a world where alliances are constantly shifting, such an imbalanced agreement could weaken Europe's position in future negotiations with other global powers. For many experts and policymakers, it's a strategic blunder that trades away the future for short-term peace and superficial stability. The fear is that Europe is sacrificing its independence and bargaining power for a deal that may not deliver real benefits. That's why opposition is so intense. Across the continent, citizens, business leaders, and politicians are voicing their concerns, demanding transparency, and calling for a renegotiation that truly serves Europe's interests. The debate is far from over, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Let's get to the heart of the outrage, the economic impact. The deal is seen as custom-built to favor U.S. industries, putting European sectors, manufacturing, tech, agriculture, at a disadvantage. It could flood EU markets with American goods, disrupt supply chains, and threaten jobs. Preferential access for U.S. companies means European businesses face unfair competition, even at home. Investment pledges may force Europe to divert resources away from its own priorities, like green energy and innovation. Critics warn this isn't partnership, it's economic takeover. The deal risks mortgaging Europe's future for the illusion of stability. The consequences are real lost jobs, stifled innovation, and growing dependence on the US. That's why the opposition is so fierce and personal. The political fallout may be even worse than the economic damage. The EU's quick capitulation has shattered its image as a strong global power. This perceived weakness invites other countries to use similar tactics, undermining EU diplomacy. Ursula von der Leyen's leadership is under fire, with accusations of betraying EU principles. The controversy has exposed deep divisions among member states, weakening unity. If the EU can't stand together on major deals, its bargaining power evaporates. The deal has become a symbol of diminished European power and will. Restoring credibility will require a fundamental shift in strategy and unity. The political consequences could ripple for years, affecting everything from climate policy to security. Despite the press conference, this deal is far from done. Internal opposition is mounting across the EU, with national governments and major parties objecting. The ratification process is shaping up to be a political demolition derby. The European Parliament is the main battleground, with many MEPs ready to challenge the agreement. Parliament can veto international deals, and opposition is strong. This resistance is the last line of defense against what many see as a disastrous agreement. Angry member states and a skeptical parliament form a powerful bloc. The fate of the deal hangs by a thread. The coming weeks will see fierce lobbying from both sides. The debate will test EU unity and democratic oversight. The EU isn't a monolith. Bad deals can be stopped by elected representatives. This fight is far from over. Critics say the EU completely misread Trump's negotiating tactics. While many European officials expected a traditional approach, Trump's style was anything but conventional. He thrived on unpredictability, using bold statements and public pressure to unsettle his counterparts. This left the EU scrambling to respond, often on the back foot. While Trump projected strength and confidence on the world stage, his administration faced its own internal pressures, political divisions, economic concerns, and the constant churn of headlines. Yet he managed to turn these challenges into negotiating leverage, making it seem as if he held all the cards. A more assertive EU could have called his bluff, recognizing that Trump's bravado often masked vulnerabilities. By standing firm and pushing for a fairer deal, European negotiators might have shifted the balance, securing better terms for their citizens and industries. Instead, negotiators walked in ready to concede, giving up leverage before talks even began. Their caution, perhaps rooted in a fear of confrontation or a desire to avoid escalation, ultimately weakened their position. The Brexit negotiations showed the EU could stand firm when it mattered. Against the UK, they held their ground and protected core interests. So why not take the same approach with the US, especially when so much was at stake? By underestimating their own power and overestimating America's, the EU handed over the advantage. They forgot that, as the world's largest trading bloc, Europe has significant influence, if only its leaders choose to wield it. It's like a heavyweight boxer, with all the strength and skill, suddenly intimidated by a heckler in the crowd and throwing the fight. The EU had the tools, but lacked the confidence to use them. This miscalculation led to a lopsided agreement that sacrifices vital European interests. jobs, industries, and even the EU's credibility as a global negotiator. The disappointment was palpable, not just in Brussels but across the continent. The lesson is clear. In global trade, confidence and resolve matter just as much as economic power. Negotiators must believe in their own strength if they want others to respect it. The EU has the tools to be a true superpower: economic clout, regulatory influence, and a unified market. But these assets are useless if leaders won't use them boldly and strategically. The real loss isn't just bad terms on paper, it's missing the chance to assert Europe's role as an equal partner on the world stage. This was an opportunity to show strength, vision, and unity. This episode is a painful reminder for Brussels and for all of Europe. It's a lesson in the cost of self-doubt and the price of underestimating your own potential. In geopolitics, perception is reality. How you see yourself and how others see you can shape the outcome of every negotiation. For the EU, the challenge now is to learn from this experience and step confidently into its role as a global leader. With the deal in shambles, critics are calling for the EU to reject it outright. Accepting it would set a terrible precedent and signal weakness to the world. The focus now is on rallying enough support to vote it down. Alternatively, some want a total renegotiation, this time with a stronger, unified EU stance. The deal isn't legally binding yet, so there's still time to change course. The choice: double down on a mistake, or admit failure and start again. The path Europe chooses will define its future. Critics' message is clear: the EU must find its backbone and stand up for itself. This is more than economics, it's a test of Europe's ability to act as a global force. Accepting a bad deal broadcasts weakness, rejecting it shows resolve. The EU's credibility, values, and future are on the line. The world is watching. Will Europe lead or follow? As of August 2025, the deal hangs by a thread. The European Commission is scrambling to salvage it, but opposition grows daily. The key battleground is the European Parliament's Trade Committee, which could make or break the agreement. National governments like Germany and France will be decisive. For citizens, the outcome will impact jobs, prices, and Europe's global standing. If rejected, the EU must craft a stronger trade strategy. This episode is a wake-up call. Europe must be more assertive in global negotiations. The world is watching to see if the EU learns from this near disaster or stumbles into the next crisis.